You are listening to episode 44. This episode is brought to you by my new course, How to Dominate LinkedIn with Your Personal Brand. Do you feel like when you're on the LinkedIn platform, you're not really sure how to actually navigate it? Does it feel clunky or confusing? And do you have all these connections, but you're not sure how to really leverage those connections and how to really show up virtually in presenting your personal brand? Well, that is what this course is about. Because since September, I've gone from 1,500 connections to about 8,000 connections on LinkedIn. Not only that, I've gotten clients through my content, and people have actually reached out to me to speak for virtual speaking engagements. So, if this is something that you would really like to capitalize on and take advantage of and learn about, then this course is definitely for you. And you can learn about it more in my show notes, and I will have the link to the waitlist just for you. And now, on with the show. On today's episode, we get to interview someone that I've just gotten to know recently and super admire, and that is Kristina Frost. I first met Kristina through the Well Collaborative, which is a community of women entrepreneurs in my city, and she was teaching one of our Working Well classes and really teaching on how we can really pay attention to how we're feeling in running our business. But not only that, she has a lot of technical skills. As you will soon learn in this episode, she has worked with a lot of huge brands in product design and various forms of design. And she is a woman in tech, and she has a lot of experience in the tech space from Silicon Valley itself. So I'm so excited to share with you her knowledge and see if you get inspired as I have on today's episode. You are listening to the sounds of inspiration. Welcome to the Okiki podcast, where we make inspirational people known. Brought to you by your host, Fian O'Brien. You are listening to the sounds of inspiration. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Okiki podcast. And today I have a very special guest. Her name is Kristina Frost, and I met her through the Well Collaborative. She has a very amazing background in tech, which she will share in the podcast. But I got taught by her in a workshop, and I was just so excited to have her on the show and to showcase her and to hear her value for you all today. So thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Fian. This is great.
And first of all, I wanted to ask, what is your background? What was your journey in actually getting into the career of your choice?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I feel like a lot of people, including myself, fall into things just by chance. Before product design and tech was a thing, I went to school. So there wasn't a program for that. But I did study something that's really close to that. So I studied what's called industrial design, which is product design of like everyday objects, anything from, shoes to cups to cars, all that cool stuff. So yeah, I really fell in love with making things and making things that were more thoughtful. And it was right before the sustainable movement was coming into place. So for me, it was really thinking about if you're going to make something, you need to be more thoughtful about it and what kind of materials you're going to use and the impact on, people and the environment. And so it's interesting because all of that really translates well into product design for technology as well. So yeah, I went to the University of Michigan. Their program was very much, I would say it's more freeform. It wasn't nearly as rigid as a program that you would see in like their private art schools. So I would say it was really meant to make me more well-rounded as an individual. It really was more was less hard skills, which I was craving, and really it was more on the conceptual side. So it was almost like an MFA program, but all of us undergrads were, yeah, we're trying to make things, and it was really hard because we didn't have the hard skills. So it was really hard to find a job as an industrial designer without having a solid portfolio showcasing hard skills. And my friend, one of my best friends, and I, we went in 2007 when we were still in college to Connecting '07, which was a Industrial Designer Society of America conference, and they were having it in San Francisco that year. And so that was our first time going to California, and we fell in love. We're like, this place is amazing. We should move here. Fast forward a couple years, my best friend, she graduated and she moved there. And then I decided to up and move without really any plans and slept on her sofa for 3 months and got a job in retail. And really, I had to slowly work my way into tech. So they also did have industrial design companies in San Francisco. Some of the bigger firms that are more well known are there, but unfortunately, the pay is not very good. So, and living in San Francisco is very expensive, and also it was much harder to get a job in industrial design just because there weren't as many jobs. So I slowly worked my way into tech. And I really started that through marketing design. And I feel like a lot of people, maybe in my generation, started that way, graphic design, marketing design. And so I was working for a public policy group, working on their events and their marketing. And then eventually I moved to another company that needed more just marketing work. And so that was really a great point where I put together proposals and did all the graphic design for their proposals. And then from there I decided I wanted to work from home. So yeah, I ended up getting a long-term remote contract with Duarte Design. And so Duarte's they're really just a big design firm. They're most well known for their presentation design and executive keynotes. So I know like Apple, I don't know if they go through them anymore, but Apple was a big client of theirs. I worked on accounts for Cisco and McAfee and Intel, and then some local companies in San Francisco as well to make their presentations. And I really loved it. I had probably one of my best bosses. I never met him in person. It was crazy. It was it was also before like video chat was a thing. So we would get on the phone together and walk through getting feedback for these 100-page keynotes, and we'd have to use Join Me. I don't know if anyone remembers Join Me, and that's kind of like a screen sharing thing. So yeah, that was really great. He was based in Chico, I was in San Francisco, and then the office was actually in Mountain View. So I really loved remote working, but I did get really lonely. It was just me and my cat, really. So I ended up getting a job at Pandora Radio. And Pandora Radio is just based in the United States. But I got to really help own and shape the sales presentations and the sales and marketing executive keynotes. So that was really a good time. And I had a really great fostering manager there as well. So really overall good experiences, but then I really still felt like I was missing something. And so that was in 2013. And so then I was starting to look for jobs in product design, entry level. And I said, since I had a solid visual design background doing lots of graphic design, I really positioned myself as a visual designer first, and was able to get a hybrid role at a startup. So that's really, I would say, where I started my journey. And it took about 4 years to get into tech. I think it's a little different now because you can go to school or take programs or workshops or whatnot to build a portfolio. But I did the long, laborious route. And yeah, so it was MoPub. I had a friend from college. We have at the University of Michigan, the network's pretty far reaching. You can find U of M people everywhere. And so it was nice that I had someone I actually went to school with, art school. He was working there as their first product designer. And so I got their second design role there as, like I said, a hybrid designer. So I was focusing on the visual design inside the product. So what someone would call UI right now. And I was also working on the marketing and branding side, which was really fun because I got to fly to New York and go to like the Times building because we were having our conference there, and
So cool.
be like, we're gonna put signs here and signs there, right? I was like, I'm living the dream. I'm really living the dream. But 5 days into my job at MoPub, we got bought by Twitter. So it was a whirlwind. So we were formally at MoPub in our office for me for a couple months, and then we moved the whole company over into the Twitter office in San Francisco. So that's really where I started, I would say, my like solid product design career.
Wow. That is quite an incredible journey. And it sounds like you're very what's it called? Opportunistic and very adaptive, because as you're explaining to the audience, you started more with industrial design. But I do find it fascinating that you were looking at the landscape saying, okay, that's not quite working, but you still managed to get these jobs with some very like well-known brands and companies. And even that in itself, I'm sure you could do maybe explanation on that in the future, how to actually land those kind of jobs, because those weren't small brands that you got to work with by any means. So you started with this tech company and then it got bought by Twitter right away. So what was that experience of being bought by this huge tech brand and very fast growing tech brand, especially at the time? What was the experience of working with them, and what did you learn from that?
Yeah, for me, it was a whirlwind. It was, the fall of 2013, and Twitter had the rumblings that they were going to be going IPO, so going public. And we were bought just before that. And it was just really just crazy. Like, it felt like we were the popular kids on the block when we got bought. And for me, it was weird because I'd only been there 2 months. So I kind of had like a weird identity crisis. But I think it was just a really great time to join because we were going IPO. I had never worked at a company that was that big before, even though my whole point was to be at a startup. I had left Pandora also because I wanted to be in a smaller company to make a bigger impact. And so I was a little bit torn, to be honest. I wasn't sure if I really wanted to be at Twitter at the time. And I had heard from former colleagues at Pandora that had worked at Twitter before. I mean, you just kind of go back and forth to the different companies, but they didn't have a positive experience. So I was a little worried about that. But I think what really helped me was that MoPub was staying fully intact as its own company. We weren't being split up. We weren't being what was called acqui-hired. They weren't just hiring the talent. They were hiring the whole company. They wanted to keep the whole company together. We were really lucky that we were able to have all of the company on the same floor, because usually they would make the sales team go up with Twitter sales, and the Twitter devs and product go down with the Twitter devs and product. So so we were really fortunate that we could still be our own company inside of Twitter. And it's still there today. Like, you could go to MoPub's website. It's still MoPub, which is really cool. So that was, for me, it was a positive experience, but I think for people who were with MoPub longer, it was maybe a different feeling, right? And some people didn't come with us, but our CEO was amazing, and he made it where all of us, the deal was you hire us all or we don't come at all. So most times you have to be go through an interview process, even if your company is being acquired by these bigger companies like Twitter. And so I honestly don't think I would have got the job at Twitter if I had to interview, because I was so new to product design. And when I got there, a few months into my job, the VP of design at Twitter was like, you have to pick one. Are you going into marketing design? And you'd be a senior there. Like, you have the skills, the expertise, and the years behind you. But if you want to be a product designer, you're going to start from the beginning, and you're going to be a product designer 1. And so I had this choice, and I was like, I will be a product designer 1 because that's really where I want to be. So I really felt like that opportunity really kept me there for a long time, because I was able to learn so much, and I was there for almost 6 years.
Wow. So that's an interesting thing too, is that you chose the choice that would help you grow, it seems, and also grow in the areas you wanted to, even though optically when it was presented to you, it seemed like, no, you should be picking this one, but you really, I guess, followed your heart in that, and you're like, no, this is where I want to grow. That's really interesting. And so I just wanted to also discuss with you, as a woman in tech and in that space, what were some of your experiences in finding those opportunities, especially out there in in the valley. Like that's so intimidating to a lot of people. And also, yeah, what was your experience being so early on the scene? Like you said, were you seeing a lot of women in that space? Were you supported regardless? What was your journey like from that perspective?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting because I felt marketing has always been a very female dominated, not industry, but part of companies. So for me, that part felt pretty normal. And actually before I went to Pandora, I was also doing investor pitch decks. I forgot to say investor pitch decks for startups. So I was really fortunate that I had friends that went through the Y Combinator program, which is a very big tech incubator. And I did their pitch deck, and then of course, like you do a good job, then they tell everyone else. So it was just basically like I became like the person doing pitch decks for YC companies, which was like amazing. So it was interesting because all of the people I interacted with were men, right? Like they're usually like engineers, with the founders of these companies, and they're men or boys, in my opinion. So for me, I kind of like had a feeling that it was going to be pretty male dominated from the technical side. So going into Twitter, I would say at least from a product design perspective, it was almost 50-50 male female. But yes, definitely when it would be a meeting with like all of the devs or the engineers, it was like a 90% male. Maybe you'd be lucky if there was like one or two female developers in your meetings. So I remember one meeting where there was, I think, literally 3 women in the entire room of like 20 people. It was crazy. And that's kind of like sadly what it's like. I think it's getting better now. But yeah, back in like 2015, it was definitely still very male dominated and very like white. Like it was very rare to find, like we would have people from around the world in Twitter, but still very much white male dominated.
Really interesting. Yeah. And also along those lines too, did you find that in some cases it was an advantage then, that you were female in the space, like in terms of even your perspective on things? Were there times it was advantageous for you, I guess?
I mean, I would like to think so. But it's just funny because all of our managers were always men. We maybe had a few female design managers in Twitter, but I reported to one. She was fantastic, but that was only for a brief period. But yeah, for the most part, most of them were white men getting to be managers, even though like our individual contributors or ICs on product design were 50% female. And that I definitely felt that. And I felt that like we had a manager who was pretty new to managing at the time. And I had one of my good friends who was a designer as well, called her emotional. Is like the thing like if you're a man, you'd be called passionate. Whereas, yeah, that was very bad feedback. So for I don't know, for me, I felt like I had to tread a bit lightly, even though I did try to show up as myself as much as possible. I'm a very honest person and very direct. So yeah. But yeah, that was definitely something that was different.
Yeah, for sure. And just trying to understand each other, trying to understand those dynamics too. Also, I just wanted to circle back just for a bit onto something you said. It sounds like that individuals in that space, there's a lot of talking to one another as well. So, were you able to find other women in tech who worked for other tech startups around you that you could almost like relate to one another on your experiences as well?
Um, Funny you should ask that. I so my best friend, she also ended up going into tech, and then another good friend of mine as well. So there's a few of us that went to art school together, studied industrial design, and landed in tech in the Bay Area. And we don't really talk about we didn't really talk about our issues with work or vent or anything. Yeah, maybe other people do. We just kind of like enjoy each other's company and don't talk about work. But
Fair enough.
But at work, yes, it's really important to find a support system, and thankfully Twitter was such a big company. Like they were like 3,500 employees at the time,
Wow.
and that was spread across the world, but we had, I think the majority were in San Francisco. But yeah, I really tried to create a support network for myself inside of Twitter and also be a support for other people as well. And there's really fabulous people at Twitter, and not just females, but there are tons of males. Like some of my developers that I worked with were some of my closest friends, and we'd go camping. Like, I mean, it was a really great opportunity. So it was really about surrounding yourself with the people that lift you up, right? It didn't necessarily matter if they're men or women.
Very cool. And I wanted to also ask about your process then of creating your own business from all of this. And like you mentioned before, you're already helping individuals in Y Combinator with their slide decks, which is a huge thing, and their prototypes and different things like that. So what then led you to start creating like your own business, or was that already starting from that point in time?
I mean, I've always done work on the side outside of my full-time job. I'm not the kind of person that would just do one thing. Design is my life. I love designing. I love creating experiences and objects. So I just can't help myself. Um, like my husband and I, we have a house we're renovating right now. We love interior design. I work full time right now at a local tech company. So, that's my like 9 to 5. And then, I really enjoy helping at the Well Collaborative, particularly for, women and women who are entrepreneurs, women in small business, and of course, women in tech. There's not there's not many locally, but it's really great when I get to connect and work with you guys, you gals. And yeah, for me, I don't know. I just like designing, so I just will always probably be doing that. I've always been entrepreneurial. So my husband and I are also starting our own little home goods company. Like he has
So
his
cool.
own film production company. Yeah, we love business, I guess. I don't know. But for me, it's just really rewarding to help utilize my skill set to help people really be their best in the work that they want to be doing. So that's what excites me the most.
Yes, that's so interesting. And I'm also very excited for those those projects that you mentioned to see them. And I also wanted to ask too, because you've kind of journeyed now before you were, right in the valley and right in the middle of all of that. And now you've migrated to the same city as me. And I was gonna say, what are like some of the huge differences you found with how it's looked like for you and your business out here? Um, I know you're working with what would be considered one of our biggest tech companies in this city for sure. um, are there things that are super similar, and are there things that are super different based on your experiences? And yeah, do you like being out of that bubble after spending the time you've invested over there?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely miss San Francisco, but it kind of wears you down. Like I was there for 9 years, and I got married, we had a baby, we bought a house, but we couldn't afford a house. You'd think like working for Twitter, you'd be able to buy a house inside San Francisco. Oh no, we were an hour and a half out of San Francisco, so I like to say the deep East Bay. So we spent 4 years living in downtown Oakland, and it was just like the best experience. We loved being there, but we couldn't afford a house there. So we had to move even more east over the Berkeley Oakland Hills, where it was quite hot. So it was crazy because you'd commute in. It would be like I'd be wearing like my flip-flops because it was like I don't know Celsius, but it was like, 90 degrees in the morning, waiting for the train. You'd get to San Francisco, and it would be like 60 degrees. Like it was just like a huge difference. So I always carried a scarf. I have all these scarves, and I never wear them now in Saskatoon because you just don't need them. So yeah, it was brutal. It really wore me down and wore my husband down because you'd have like one way it would be like a 2-hour commute, sometimes a 3-hour commute just to get to a film project. And so for us, we really wanted to be close to family. Despite, I had really built my life in San Francisco. All my best friends were there from college. It was home. But yeah, we decided to move here. For me, it was funny because I told him I'd never live in Saskatoon or Saskatchewan, actually. I was like, I will never live in Saskatchewan. Like, no way. Like, I'll move to Calgary.
I
I'll
don't
move
blame you
to,
in some ways. Like, why, from an outside perspective, you'd be like, what? Why am I moving there?
yeah. Well, when I moved here, everyone's like, why would you move here? But, he's from here. His family's here. I had come to visit quite a few times and I ended up really liking it. I found the things that I needed. Like for me, I have to have, I'm a coffee snob, so I have to have good coffee, and San Francisco is known for good coffee. And the outdoors as well is really important to me. The outdoors are a little different here, and that's totally fine. So I can appreciate the outdoors. It doesn't have to be rugged mountains all the time. And I like that we're only 6 hours away from like Banff. So that's not too bad. But yeah, it is definitely different. For me, it was really helpful to find a group of women. That was something that was going to be important to me, was finding people to surround myself with. And I found that through the Well Collaborative, and I found it through Facebook actually. It was just like I was like looking through Facebook events, trying. I was like, how can I find friends? And then I saw, yeah, there was this thing called Coffee and Connection, and I went, and the rest is really history. I was just like, I clung on to the well, and it's been a really exciting ride, and I just really enjoy my time working with those girls. And so that really helped me. But yeah, working here at one of the local tech companies, there's a lot of similar things and a lot of different things, I would say. They've adopted a lot of what the Valley does when it comes to like how you drive to create success in your company and grow your company. So Google really, I think they're the main ones that really came up with the OKR framework. So it's objectives and key results. And so they really follow that, which is nice. As a product designer, I'm someone who needs to really work with metrics. So in like data, that really helps me inform what decisions I should make for a user and the user experience. So it can't just be qualitative. It can't just be user interviews. You need both. You need to also look at like a cumulative amount of data to just see like how many people are clicking on this button. Do they know where to find this? And so that's something that we're working towards, and we find a lot of value in that. So that's great. And the people we work with are top notch, at the company. I really enjoy I work across two product teams. And so that means I have two separate engineering teams that I work with and two different product managers. And it's great. They're at Twitter, I only worked with one at a time, just because the company was so big and you had that luxury. But yeah, here it's a little bit smaller, but having the two different teams, it's like two different cultures. And it's like they have two different they're like at two different skill sets. Like one's like a really senior team and one's like a really scrappy, like new school, like young team.
Interesting.
And so it's so interesting, and they're fun. They're both fun in their own way. And there's a lot of trust, right? Like everyone
Mm.
trusts, at least in my teams, I'm very fortunate where, they trust me as the expert in design and user experience, and I trust them. And, you know, if you work in tech, it's a lot of negotiation, right, with developers, because they're like, well,
Mm.
that's gonna take me like 900 lines of extra code or like 2 extra
Right.
weeks of work. So a lot of what you do is communicate and align and negotiate with your team, really, um,
Hmm.
to create the best user experience you can with the time constraints that you have. And yeah, they run, just, I would say, just like the Valley in that capacity. Like I'm not missing that at all.
Yeah, for sure. So I think it's probably like fortunate for you that you were able to find like a tech company that's at least running in that capacity here, as well as the community, like you said, that you found with the Well Collaborative, which I agree. I'm also just a recent member of the Well Collaborative, and I was surprised just how embracing the group actually is. So that is really exciting to hear that you were able to create that for yourself. And I guess I wanted to ask too, what would be your advice to women who are trying to enter, tech and entrepreneurship? Yeah, what's your advice for anyone who might be listening who knows they have dreams to try and create in this space, but they might be feeling a little intimidated to do so?
Yeah, I think it takes a lot of, I mean, I only know one route that I went, right? You could either go the route of school and build a portfolio that way, but I found a lot of tech companies aren't, at least like the bigger ones, won't necessarily hire you right out of school. They want to see that you have experience. So it's like kind of like, well, how am I supposed to get experience if I don't, you know? And so I guess my advice in that capacity is you might have to work your way into product design or into tech, right? As a designer, I can say, you know, you might have to do what I did and start in the world of graphic design, and then maybe you move into visual design for products, you know, software products, and then from there you start to build on those other skills of, you know, user experience design and prototyping, and once you have that, and then also design thinking. So, and the way that I would recommend doing that is work with smaller companies that need the help. Like I found to even get into presentation design, I started with low, you know, my rates were $40 an hour in the very beginning, just like a steal. And then I was able to, you know, bring them up to $150 an hour. And I also got to work with really great clients towards when I was on the higher spectrum, right? So it's just, you want to slowly build up a portfolio, slowly build up your experience, and just like, yeah, working with people, like just, you know, let them know that you're willing to work with them, I think is a really a good first step into building a portfolio. And then in terms of like getting the jobs, at least in the design world and product design, they really want you to show your process and show your work. So that's something that I had to work, like I never really had to do like a product design portfolio until I left Twitter. It was terrifying. Like even though I interviewed like tons of people coming into Twitter, I never had to do it myself, and it was scary. But really, you need to present yourself as, oh, I didn't just like make this one little piece, this feature in the app. It was like, okay, we had this problem that, you know, the company decided we needed to move a metric on, you know, let's increase tweets by 5% year over year. And you're like, okay, so how do I do that? And that's really where you're going to start your journey, right? And then you break it down saying like, oh, we, you know, we did some research or we brainstormed some different ways to like make people want to tweet more, and then we narrowed in and decided to go and design this one experience, right? And then that's how you really talk about how you created this experience. You talk about your role and your responsibility. People want to know how you've worked together with these people, if you've worked with developers, or if it's just like vaporware, you know, if it's just on Dribble. Like it's not, Dribble's a good helpful thing to showcase things, but usually if you want to get into tech, you have to show that you've worked with people. So even if you can't get paying gigs, find developers and friends that want to just make side projects, you know, just get some things together. And then from there you can really showcase how you've done all these, because it's really about how you collaborate with people and not just making pretty wireframes or pretty mocks or whatever you want to call them.
That's really good advice. Yeah, that's excellent advice. Thank you so much for that. And I also wanted to give you a chance to share with our audience. If you've already shared actually a few things, but do you have any specific upcoming projects that you would like our audience to know about, to look out for?
I mean, yeah. So we have sapandseedling.com. So my husband and I are working on a home goods store, and then also a place where we blog about some of our experience in the home renovation space, since we're probably going to be renovating this house for like 10 years. It's a lot of work doing it ourselves. And then also, you know, I really want to plug the Well Collaborative, you know, thewellcollaborative.com. Is such a near and dear place, like meeting you there. Like you just meet such fantastic women from really around the world that come from all different walks of life in different industries and different, like all ages too, which I just love. It's not just one type of person that you meet there, and that's what's really special about it. The events are great. Tammy, the founder, and we put on Working Well once a month. That's obviously my favorite thing. But if you want to just dip your toes in, a good coffee and connection is really a great way to meet other women and have that human to human experience. And everything's virtual right now, which I'm really excited about, even though I do miss the in-person interaction. But that means anyone from anywhere can join these things. So to me, that's really exciting.
That's awesome. And I guess my last question for you is, what is the thing you value the most about the role that you're in today and the experiences that you've had in product design?
Yeah, I think what's really great right now in the role that I'm at the company I'm at, they really trust me and they really give me ownership of things. It's been really refreshing to be at a place where when you say something, people listen and people give you the space and the word, like the energy, like they want you to do these things. They empower you. And that's just been really, really nice. Like that's how I want everyone to be working in tech. So yeah, it's really nice to feel valued, to feel heard. And when I get to bring my expertise from this bigger company into a younger, smaller company, it's pretty rewarding, I would say.
So cool. Thank you so much, Kristina. Thank you for taking the time to share that value with our audience today and sharing your journey. I was definitely super inspired by it.
Thanks. Yeah, it's interesting when you live your life, right? Because you're like, oh, my life's not interesting, but your story, everyone else's story is always way more interesting than your story. So I'm glad that it was inspiring.